every turn I take, every trail I track, every path I make, every road leads back to the place I know, where I cannot go, where I long to be. See the line where the sky meets the sea, it calls me, and no one knows how far it goes. If the wind in my sail on the sea stays behind me, one day I'll know. If I go, there's just no telling how far I'll go. I know everybody on this island seems so happy on this island. Everything is by design. I know everybody on this island has a role on this island, so maybe I can roll with mine. I can lead with pride, I can make us strong. I'll be satisfied if I play along, but the voice inside sings a different song. What is wrong with me? See the light as it shines on the sea, it's blinding, but no one knows how deep it goes. If the wind in my sail on the sea stays behind me, one day I'll know. If I go, there's just no telling how far I'll go.
Our opening words this morning are from the Reverend A. Powell Davies. Life is just the chance to grow a soul. Between nature and nurture, who and what we become is a lifelong process. We are both the raw material and the artist. Every experience becomes part of the material with which we can work. Every person we meet is a possible partner in a mutual collaboration of formation. To be sure, we can stop the process by settling, by letting the clay of our being harden, but the wiser choice is to remain pliable. And the goal? To complete our life before it is ended by death. The people that we tend to admire are those who kept growing and changing throughout their life, first by addition and then by subtraction, as they shed layer upon layer in search of their essence.
Have you ever heard the term actions speak louder than words? What does that mean to you guys? Fun. Good. Anybody else have another take? Actions speak louder than words. What does that mean? Well, actions speak louder than words usually means that the things we do are more important than the words we say. Words are important, but we show what's most important to us by the things we do. This story is about that. I thought it was important to think about our actions and the messages that we send in what we do as we start this month with our theme being formation. This story is called Fruits, and it comes from a book called A Bucket Full of Dreams. Once upon a time, a mother and her child were carrying bags of food to a neighboring village where people were hungry and had no food of their own. The two had to travel a great distance, which made them very tired, so they stopped to rest. As they sat down, they heard a voice call out to them. "Hello," said the voice. The two travelers looked around but saw no one. "Hello," said the voice again. "Look over here by the rock." The mother and her child looked over by the rock, and there they saw a thorn bush. The two looked at the thorn bush for a moment, and then they looked at each other. "I believe that thorn bush is talking to us," said the child. "I am not a thorn bush," said the voice. "I am a beautiful apple tree. If you like, you may sit a while and admire my beauty." "If you don't mind my saying so," said the child, "you do not look anything like an apple tree, and you do look exactly like a thorn bush." "Silly child," said the voice, "I am the most beautiful apple tree in all the land. Please feel free to sit and enjoy my beauty." "Are you quite sure you are an apple tree?" asked the mother. "Yes," said the voice from the bush, "I am quite sure." "Then perhaps you can help us," said the mother. "You see, we are carrying food to a neighboring village where people are hungry. Since you are an apple tree, you could give us some apples to take to the people who have nothing to eat." "No," said the voice from the thorn bush. "No," asked the mother. "Why not? The people are very hungry. They don't have any food at all. They would love to have some of your apples." "No," repeated the voice from the thorn bush. "You see, I don't have any apples right now." "Oh," said the mother, "that's too bad." After a moment she said, "Well, we must be going." And the mother and child stood up and continued on the road to the village. "Come back," cried the thorn bush. "Come back and admire my beauty." But the mother and the child did not hear the thorn bush. After the two had traveled many miles, they became very tired once again and decided it was time to stop and rest. They had not been sitting long when they heard another voice. "Hello," said the voice. The mother and her child looked around a while before they noticed a person sitting next to a rock. They were dressed in very stylish and expensive clothes. "Don't worry," they said. "I'm not a bad person. I won't hurt you. In fact, I'm a very good person." "You're a good person?" asked the mother uncertainly. "Oh, yes," they said. "I'm a very, very good person. I read the holy book every day for hours and hours. I pray each morning when I rise, and I pray again in the evening when I go to bed." "Are you quite sure you're a good person?" asked the mother. "Oh, yes," they replied. "I'm quite sure." "Well, then, perhaps you will help us," said the mother. "My child and I are carrying food to a neighboring village where the people are hungry. We're very tired from walking for so long. Would you please help us carry these bags to the village so that the people there will have something to eat?" "No," they said. "I'm a good person, but if I were to help you carry those bags, I might mess up my nice new clothes. Then I might not look as good." "How would anyone know I'm a good person if I don't look fine? Sorry, but I can't help you." "Oh," said the mother, "that's too bad." After a moment she said, "Well, we must be on our way." And the two picked up their bags of food and continued down the road. "No, come back," yelled the person. "Stay here with me, for I am very lonely." But the mother and her child didn't hear the person, and they continued walking on the road to the village. For a while the two walked in silence. Finally, the child said to her mother, "I'm confused. Today we have seen a strange plant that claimed to be an apple tree, and we also saw a strange person who claimed to be good. But how can we be sure? I mean, how can we tell a real apple from a fake one, or a real good person from a fake one?" "Well," said the mother, "it isn't always easy to tell the difference between something that is real and something that is fake. But it seems to me that if you want to call yourself an apple tree, then you should give the world some apples. And if you want to call yourself a good person, then you should give this world some loving kindness and a helping hand. After all, it is by our fruits that we are known."
Standing in line, marking time, waiting for the welfare dime, 'cause they can't buy a job. The man in the silk suit hurries by as he catches the poor old lady's eyes. Just for fun, he says, "Get a job." That's just the way it is. Some things will never change. never change. That's just the way it is. Oh, but don't you believe them? Well, they passed a law in 64 to give those who ain't got a little more. But it only goes so far, because the law in another's mind, when all it sees at the hiring time is a line on the color bar. That's just the way it is. Some things will never change. That's just the way it is. Oh, but don't you believe them? Oh, don't you believe them?
So the reading I have for you this morning is called Red Bubble Letters, and it's by Reverend Misha Sanders. It's part of the Braver Wiser blog that comes out from the UUA, and if you guys get a chance, it's a really good blog to subscribe to. So it starts with a quote from Bob Dylan. It says, "When the evening shadows and the stars appear, and there's no one there to dry your tears, I could hold you for 1,000,000 years to make you feel my love." She says, "My sister had just taught me how to make bubble letters, which I thought would surely impress all of my friends." Do you guys remember making those big bubble letters? Yeah. So before all the other children arrived, I drew and meticulously colored in big, wobbly red bubble letters, "God is love," on the green chalkboard in my kindergarten Sunday school classroom. Not long into class, after all the children had arrived and pretty much ignored my artistry, one of my all-time favorite teachers picked up an eraser and began to swipe over the dusty old board, much to my dismay. But I was even more dismayed that my artistic creation did not seem to be fading despite her vigorous attempt. Mysterious, miraculous, perhaps. Well, it turns out that red chalk was, in my defense, it was on the chalk tray. It was actually a stumpy little red crayon. And the tears started. As I recall, right about the time my friends began whispering that I was definitely in big trouble. I was as mortified as a 6-year-old can get. I was mortified, that is, only until that beautiful, wise Sunday school teacher scooped me into her arms in a clear moment of amazing grace. I heard her deep alto laugh in my ear, and she said, "Oh, no one's in trouble. Don't you see, dear children, this is just perfect. What can erase God's love? Nothing." She ended the warm hug with a squeeze, and then gleefully picked up a piece of white chalk and began writing quickly around my unintentionally semi-permanent crayon art. She wrote up all the things that we could think to yell out that make us feel unlovable in the eyes of God. Lying, cheating at school, cussing, hitting your brother, cutting in line for the slide, chewing gum in church. You know, that was a lot for kids. This was a conservative 1970s church. But then, with a dramatic flourish, she again picked up the dusty eraser and wiped it all away, leaving only, "God is love." God is love in big, wobbly bubble letters. It's my only memory of a lesson from kindergarten Sunday school class, but maybe it's the only one that counts. And she closes with a prayer. She says, "Spirit of love, when we try hard but make a mess anyway, because we are all only precious children after all, may we remember to laugh and to hold each other close and marvel at the truth that remains, which in the end is only love.
The water is wide, I can't get over. Neither have I the wings to fly. Give me a boat that carries two. We both shall row, my friend and I. As I look out across the sea, a bright horizon beckons me, and I am called to do my best and be the most that I can be. The water is wide, I can't get over. Neither have I the wings to fly. Give me a boat that carries two. We both shall row, my friend and I.
Wild geese. Good night, far flies the light, but still God's love shines above, making all bright. Good night. Those are the words to the bedtime poem that my mom would say every night when she put me to bed. I didn't grow up saying a bedtime prayer. Looking back, I can see how this simple nighttime ritual shaped my idea of God. God wasn't a person I talked to or asked for gifts or asked for blessings or gave my fond regards to. God was a force of love that lit up the universe. And unlike the sunlight that disappears when the earth turns us away from it, or that we can hide from in the lee of a rock or under the ground or in a building, God's love was a force that surrounded us always, everywhere we go. So that's the story I tell myself about God. And the stories we tell ourselves, they matter. René Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum." Actually, he said it in French, but my French accent is terrible, so I will spare you. What Descartes meant was that the only thing he could be sure of in life was that he was thinking. He couldn't be sure of the world outside his body because he couldn't experience things outside his body except through his body. And sometimes his body would lie to him because when he was asleep, he would be experiencing things through his body except that he was asleep, so he wasn't really. He couldn't be sure of the truth of his perceptions, but he could be sure that he was thinking because he was telling himself stories about the things that his senses perceived. In a very real way, Descartes believed that we are made up of the stories that we tell ourselves. So that begs the question, what kind of stories do you tell yourself? My mom used to feel that we internalize the stories that we hear when we're young, and we somehow use those to live our lives. She would say, some people live the Little Mermaid all the time, and she felt that she lived the story of Heidi. I'm not sure how, because if you've ever seen Western New York, it is flat as a pancake, and Heidi's about the mountains. Well, the story that I lived for most of my life was the story of Cinderella. Now, I know Cinderella's out of favor now because modern princesses are supposed to slay their own dragons and save themselves, and Cinderella is most famous for her impractical footwear. But at its core, I see Cinderella as a story about hard work. Now, that's probably not how you see the story, but that's how I've always seen the story. Cinderella's job is to keep her head down and work really, really hard. And even though that work is menial, and the people around her are mean to her, and she doesn't deserve it, she keeps working hard, and she doesn't complain. And if you've seen the Disney version, not only does she not complain, she sings while she works, and she's kind to the animals, and she laughs, and she jokes, and she gives all she can, even though she doesn't have much to give. I mean, she even dresses the little mice in costumes. If I were a mouse, I wouldn't really appreciate that, but the mice in the costumes seem to appreciate it. But eventually, after all that hard work, she is recognized and she is rewarded. The reward in the story, I will grant you, that's outdated, because marrying someone you've only known for one day is pretty rash. It doesn't matter how rich he is. But the rest of the lesson works pretty well. I grew up telling myself the story that if I kept quiet and did what I was supposed to, I would win at life. I also grew up during the self-esteem movement. In fact, one of my mom's friends gave me a joke gift for Christmas one year. It was a big pink banner with the letter self-esteem written across it in giant capital letters. He said, "Don't let anyone tell you that no one else can give you self-esteem." I put that right there on my wall and over my Albert Einstein poster that said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." But that's one of the interesting things about that self-esteem movement. By definition, self-esteem is supposed to come from within yourself. It's supposed to be the product of a story that you're telling yourself on the inside. But the self-esteem movement is all about external validation. Everybody gets their trophy just for showing up. Letter grades get changed to number grades, which get changed to different letter grades, which get changed back to the original letter grades because, your children have to be told that they are beautiful and smart and good at everything so that they will grow up to be beautiful and smart and good at everything. And they will believe anything is possible and that everything is within their grasp. Self-esteem movement told us that failing to praise your child is just straight out failing your child. But you know what it turns out? All these self-esteem boosters are actually not helping kids to grow up to be more successful. Journalists Poe Bronson and Ashley Merriman wrote in their 2009 book, Nurture Shock, all of this praise actually biases us towards a fear of failure. They write about the work of Dr. Carol Dweck, who did most of her research in fifth grade classrooms in inner city New York. So I'm going to tell you about one of the experiments. She took 2 groups of fifth graders, and she gave them some pretty easy logic puzzles to solve. And then when she was done, they were in one of 2 groups, randomly, one of 2 groups. They got one line of praise. The line of praise they got was either, "You did really well. Oh, you must be really good at this." Or, "You did really well. Well, you must have worked really hard." Now, you wouldn't think that would make a big difference. It's just one line of praise from a total stranger. The next thing that happened was the kids were given another set of puzzles to solve, and they could choose. Do they want to get puzzles that were a little harder this time, or do they want to get the same level of puzzles they had before? Well, overwhelmingly, the kids who were praised for being smart chose the same kind of puzzles they had before. And the vast majority, like 90% of the children praised for working hard, they chose more difficult puzzles. In other words, praising kids for being naturally good at something made them afraid of trying and failing. The result became more important than the process. But praising the kids for the effort that they put in, that emphasized the process, and also it made the praise impossible to invalidate. You can feel as if you've lost being smart if suddenly you get to a challenge and you can't overcome it. But you can't lose your praise for hard work, because even if you have to work harder than you did before, well, that's just more praise. You're just working harder. Even if you're struggling, you're still working hard. That brings to mind a quote from Albert Einstein. He said, "Anyone who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new." Einstein was not afraid to fail. He spent years at Princeton trying to unite gravity and electromagnetism and quantum mechanics into a single unified theory. And he ultimately, after going down many different blind corridors, he didn't make it. Physicists are still trying to unite those three things. But one of the famous things about Albert Einstein is that no one called him smart while he was growing up. He worked hard and he overcame his limitations. Okay, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. He may not have spoken until he was 4, but he taught himself calculus at the age of 12, so I'm going to give him a pass. But it's interesting how that story of Einstein, the poor student, it really persists. You can look it up on Snopes, and people are like, yeah, I know, he was actually smart, but no, he wasn't that smart. You're like, wait, what? Because we like to have stories of successful people who struggled so that we can point to those stories and tell ourselves their stories while we are struggling. I was reading this book by Jen Sincero that has a title, You Are a Bad, and then it's another word for Heine that I'm not going to say, where she emphasizes the value of hard work and persistence. She says something along the lines of, you tell yourself that you're going to catch the bus, but then you run as hard as you can to get there. She's a proponent of Angela Duckworth's work on grit. And, among other stories, her book mentions the story of Michael Jordan. Did you know he was cut by his high school team? Yeah, I bet they were regretting that. And then the story of Fred Smith. He's the founder of FedEx, but when he wrote his original business plan, when he was in Yale Business School, he got a C. I don't know, I just FedEx something like yesterday, so I think he might have been okay. So lots of people learn from their setbacks, and they keep repeating their stories of success to themselves, and they work really hard, and they make those stories a reality. Sincero points out that sometimes we spend so much time and energy focusing on things that we don't like about ourselves that we completely can overlook the things that we do well. So I'm going to give you an exercise that she gives in her chapter. It's so easy once you figure out it's not hard. So we're all going to do this together here. We're going to take about 10 seconds, and you're each going to look around and count all the things you can see that are yellow. So here we go. Yellow things. Ding, 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 ding. Okay. So we counted all the yellow things, right? You have that number in mind? Great. Now, how many of them were red? Oh, but you weren't looking for red. Yeah, just like Descartes, Sincero points out that what you choose to focus on is what is real to you. There are probably tons of red things around that you weren't looking at because that's not what you were focused on counting. It's a little bit like the test that was devised by researchers Dr. Daniel Simon and Dr. Christopher Chabris. This test, it's really fun. You can actually look this up on the internet. So you are watching this video, and you have to count the number of times that they pass a basketball between this random number of people. And so you count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and you're counting, and you're counting, and you're counting. And at the end, he says, and how many gorillas were there? And really, there are so many people who are like, what? But there's this gorilla that just walks back and forth in the back of the scene, like, well, across, goes back across. And people miss it. People miss an entire gorilla. It's called the invisible gorilla experiment. Because sometimes we get so focused on one task or one idea that we miss something that's right in front of us. And even though I was reading this book about your bad Heine, I wanted to dislike it. And part of the reason I wasn't sure about this book is that it's an outgrowth of the power of attraction movement. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's this movement where it takes this theory of what I think is what I am to this whole new level, where if you think only good things, then good things happen. And if you think negative things, then negative things happen. The negativity in your life is caused by a negative attitude. And so you're telling yourself the wrong stories, and you are at fault for your own unhappiness because you're not focusing on the right things. So she says, improve your life by telling yourself better stories. Now, in some level, okay, I can see where we've done all this work on focus. So yes, if you're only focusing on how you hate the way your hands look, well, you're not going to notice that, you've been working out for the past 3 months and now you've got buff arms because you're looking at the backs of your hands. Oh my gosh, I should use more cream, right? But on the other hand, I'm really worried about the idea that simply thinking better makes you luckier somehow. And it's not so much what she says, it's kind of what she claims. I love the idea that she says generosity makes you feel better and gives you a better outlook on life. She has this chapter called Give and Let Give. And then she suggests that when you meet someone, when somebody comes up to you and they're mean to you, and then you're kind back, you improve your day because you're not reflecting back that negativity, and you improve their day because they're like, oh, someone was nice to me, maybe I don't have to be mean. There's research that supports this idea that when you go out and do kind things for others, that it really improves your mood. There's a research study where they gave people $5, and they either said, spend it on something nice for yourself, or give it to somebody so they can spend something nice for themselves. And the people who bought themselves a coffee that they don't normally get, they were a little bit happier, and it went away right away. But the people who were they bought a toy for a screaming toddler at the Target because they were behind the mom who was going, shh, honey, it's okay, we're almost out. They felt so good for the whole day because they really felt like they helped someone. So yeah, that provides a better mood boost. But then, the chapter goes on to give an example of someone who claims that following Sincero's advice on generosity helped place her symptoms of MS in remission. And I think that kind of overdoing is a little dangerous. So I'm also leery of this movement because there's this notion that you are to blame if something bad happens to you, because you must have had some kind of negative thought to attract a bad thing to you. There are some terrible things that happen in life, and we don't have control over what they are. We don't have control over who they happen to. Imagining that we have that control is dangerous. Of course, we have a choice as to how we react in any situation that life throws our way, but we don't control the weather with our moods. We can't avert the hurricane that hit North Carolina. We can't avert that earthquake that hit Indonesia. We don't control the health of our loved ones. We can't prevent freak accidents or terrible tragedies by imagining them away. There's a line between Pollyanna and delusional. So I thought it was really amazing, an amazing coincidence that you are giving half of your plate to brain cancer research. And I happened to mention in my service, my mom had a glioblastoma. So that's a brain cancer that's usually you get about a year. It's the same type of brain cancer that killed John McCain and Ted Kennedy. And when my mom was diagnosed, the doctors, they tried to comfort us, and they said, having a good attitude will help. I don't know what they thought that having this good attitude would help with. And I don't know if what my sister and I heard when they said that was the same thing that they meant to say. What I heard was that my mom has cancer. She probably has about a year left to live. But if I believed with all my heart that she wasn't dying, maybe she'd live a little longer. If I could tell myself the story of a well mother, then that would be reality. And if I acknowledged my mom was dying, well, that was just signing her death notice early. The poem that I took the the title for the sermon from is Mary Oliver's poem, Wild Geese. And it goes like this. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees and the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. My mom was a minister, and she had a picture on the back of her door in her office. It was a pastoral scene of a girl herding geese. And you would think that it would be very calm and soothing, and it wasn't. The geese were flying at the girl and battering her with their wings while she was covering her head and cowering. And my mom said, well, some days that's what it feels like to be a minister. And honestly, I feel like some days that is what it feels like to be a human. We try so hard to help and protect the people around us. We try to be the person that other people expect us to be. We try, and then the world turns around and batters us with its wings. And it's hard to keep trying, especially because the world will keep turning either way. The geese and the rocks and the clear water are not dependent upon us thinking them into being. I don't think I did a good job with the stories that we lived while my mom was dying. I should have reminded her that you do not have to be good. You do not have to be perfect. You do not have to spend your last days looking for sins to repent. I should have reminded her that she's a person and not just a patient, and I can't go back and change that. I wanted to tell her my despair and hear her despair in return. I should have told her that our love for her, my sisters, my aunt, her husband, my husband, that our love for her is like the red bubble letters. And no matter how many other words we put over them, her memory is in us, just like our love is in her. And that those letters, they can't be erased by any force. The greatest of all the stories we tell ourselves, they come down to love. As long as we remember love in the stories we tell ourselves, we will never go wrong. God's love is everywhere, like the sunlight. But it's more powerful than the sun because you can't hide from it, and it's still there even if you turn your face away. And it makes all bright. Good night.